Okay. So now.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Always great to have the choir backing me up on that. Thank you. Welcome to each and every one of you. We begin, as always, by embracing all that you come with this morning, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences. Everything that helps make you who you are is welcome here today, and that includes those of you who are in the room with us, whether you are frequent attendees or joining us for the first time, you're equally as welcome, as well as those who are streaming with us this morning and the many of you who are Zooming with us as well. And I do want to take a couple minutes to, at the start of our service, to welcome our Zoom attendees, and I want to start with Stephen Palmer, who I believe is hosting today. Stephen, how's it going?
Well, Todd, so far so good. I think we have about 13 people who have joined us so far. We expect a few more as the service goes on, a few new people, and one whom you may know, Bruce Knotts, who's been the head of our Unitarian Universalist UN office, retired now from that position, but we're especially excited to have Bruce join us. And but we'll get to meet everybody else in the course of our welcoming and later on in our coffee hour discussion.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have all of you, and I do want to welcome Bruce Knotts myself. I did just a little bit of background research on him this morning because I wanted to give him a proper introduction to the congregation and to thank him for his years of service, both to our liberal religion but also to our country and to our world. Bruce, as mentioned, was former head of the UU office at the United Nations. He was, I believe, from 2008 until 2022 when he retired just last year. He's been a Peace Corps volunteer in Ethiopia, worked in Saudi Arabia and Somalia for the U.S. State Department as a diplomat and as a board member, elected board member of the, let me get this straight here. Well, let me back up. Yeah, he joined the State Department as a U.S. diplomat in 1984, and in 2004, he was elected to the board of Gays and Lesbians and Foreign Affairs Agency, working to assure the fair treatment of gays and lesbians working and living abroad. So a whole life of doing great work on behalf of our liberal values, our liberal religion, and I think the values that our country is supposed to represent. So Bruce, I'd love to give you a moment to say a few words if you'd like, but first of all, welcome to you, and thank you for your life's work.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here and look forward to this service.
Well, thank you so much. Great to have you. And again, great to have all of you joining us via Zoom today. So your group has grown so much we don't get to introduce everybody individually anymore, but we are so glad that you are joining us. So thanks to everyone for being here this morning. We are going to take a few moments now, as usual, to greet one another, whether you are here in person or you can greet each other on Zoom, or if you're streaming with us and want to send a text, those would be welcome too.
I think we can briefly unmute and just...
Okay, thank you. And as always, there's more time to visit during our social hour following the service. But let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening words are adapted from a touchstone issue from 2020. In an address in January 1980 at First Parish in Cambridge, a Unitarian Universalist church, novelist Kurt Vonnegut said that dignity is something human beings give to each other. He believed that if we do not do this, there is no other way dignity can be acquired. The key solution to human problems, Vonnegut kept insisting, is to find human dignity for all human beings, even those who seem to least deserve it. Vonnegut believed that dignity isn't an exclusive privilege for the well-to-do or successful, but is intrinsic to simply being a human being. As Vonnegut knew, our strong societal bias towards doing concludes that our worth and dignity are conditional on what we do, not who we are. It teaches that worth and dignity are external rewards, not internal realities. What are you worth when you're not doing anything? The affirmation of inherent dignity is an abiding reminder to all of us to hold our heads high, that we may all look in each other's eyes and see ourselves lovingly reflected there as we become the mirror for each other. Our eyes and our hearts work best when they are both windows and mirrors.
Our second hymn of the morning is called One World. It's in your hardback hymnal if you care to look there, or of course it's on the screen, number 133. Please rise as you're willing and able. One world, this for all its sorrow. One world, shaping one tomorrow. One humanity, though riven, we to whom a world is given. From one world there is no turning. For one world the prophets yearning. One the world of poets, sages. One world goal of all the ages. World so eagerly expected. World so recklessly rejected. What as common folk have willed it. One as covenants can build it. World of friendly ways and faces. Cherished hearts and honored races. One world free in word and science. People free. It's for reliance.
And we are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. And want to begin, as we have been, the candle on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that region of the world that are being most impacted by the violence there. I received a call from my friend and our friend, Reverend Happy Watkins, yesterday, letting me know that he's been having a rough time. He lost his brother-in-law recently and has a step-granddaughter who had to undergo emergency surgery this week, and it's been a tough time in other ways for Happy and his family. So he said, I don't just want you to light a candle for me, I want you to light the biggest candle for me you can. So we will expand the light of our candle through our hearts today on behalf of Happy Watkins. I also want to light a candle in celebration for the Christians and family. I know they're not going to be here today, but for Billy and Kelsey and Alex and Brooklyn and Zuri and Theo and Grandma Donna. Great-grandma.
The kids.
Well, to the kids, okay. Great-grandma, who is also a great-grandma. On behalf of the adoption of their youngest family member, Charlotte, better known as Charlie. Charlie's adoption became official on Thursday, January 26th. So congratulate all of them when you see them. Yeah. Okay, so one more candle. This I found out just a little while ago, so happens to be the beginning of a new decade for Doug Deaton. It is Doug Deaton's 80th birthday today. I can't even believe it. He's so active and healthy, looks so young, but he's turned 80 today, so I think on the occasion we should sing Happy Birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Doug. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. And by the way, welcome to Doug's daughter, Lenore, who is with us. They just got back from a vacation together, but she actually lives in Oakland, so we're glad to have you all the way up here in Spokane today, too. So good to have you, good to meet you. Okay, so let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others that you might be thinking of, and you'd be welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence and in our rattling, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
And then my soul
Good morning. Before I launch into our Time for All Ages story, I did want to plug a couple of events that are in your bulletin. I hope that's okay. Yeah, this coming Friday, February 10th at 5 o'clock in the chapel, I'll be leading a all-levels yoga class followed by kombucha and very clean bliss balls to snack on. So I hope you can join us. It was an auction item that we're just opening up to everybody. And it coincidentally is also our first parents' night out in a long time. So free babysitting, 5 to 8:30 for any families that you know. Feel free to spread the word. We've got a couple spots left there. So my story this morning is adapted from one written by Martha Dallas. I'm curious to know what you all believe about your favorite, what you think is the best food. So think about that for just a moment. And I'm going to scan the audience, and when my pointer finger comes to you, feel free to shout out what you think is the best food. Let's start over here with the choir. I think we've got some opinions.
Chocolate cake.
As shallow as it sounds, pizza.
Artichokes.
All right. What a diversity of beliefs. I'm not surprised by this. But I also believe that many of you may change your mind. What you believe is the best food today may not be what you believe is the best food for the rest of your life. It's very possible for that best food to get knocked from its throne and be replaced by a different best food. As Unitarian Universalists, we really value the freedom that each of us has to believe about not just things like what we think is the best food, but bigger things like, why are we here? What's the meaning of our lives? What's most important and valuable to me? How can I be most true to the purpose I see for being alive in the world? We affirm the freedom to believe what we choose about these things, but we also have the responsibility to work out these beliefs with thought and care. And thank goodness we don't have to do that all by ourselves. We are fortunate to have one another to help us try out our beliefs. It's like we can offer one another tastes of ideas that seem true. It's like together we each bring our best food to share at a potluck. We each bring our treasured beliefs to share with one another here in our congregation. We can put several on our plate, first the ones that we're confident we know we'll like, and then maybe we can go back for seconds for a chance to try something that our friends recommend as really yummy. And sometimes those new yummy tastes will become our new best favorite.
We turn now in our service to a time of meditation and contemplation. Find a receptive posture, take some deep breaths, close your eyes if you wish, as I lead you into silence with these words by Norwegian poet Rolf Jacobson. All people are children when they sleep. There's no war in them then. They open their hands and breathe in that quiet rhythm heaven has given them. If only we could speak to one another then, when our hearts are half-open flowers, words like golden bees would drift in.
We have a nice little step down here for folks of different heights to use, so sometimes we have to bend down under the pulpit to move it in and out, so you know what's going on there. But I'm going to invite you to join me in a responsive reading today, number 521. Deb, if you're okay with helping to read for our folks who are streaming and zooming with us, so at least they can hear the wording here. I'm sorry we don't have to put up on screen for you, but this is number 521. Number 521 in the back of the gray hymnal. And I will begin and ask our congregation to be our respondents. May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal and abides.
May I wish for every person's happiness and envy none.
May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me.
May I, to the extent of my power, give needful help to all who are in want.
May I never fail a friend.
May I respect myself.
May I always keep tame that which rages within me.
May I accustom myself to be gentle and never be angry with others because of circumstances.
May I know good people and follow in their footsteps. Eusebius.
Benedictus, 'Crucis, 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 'Crucis,
Thank you. Thank you. It's beautiful. So I've been on a nostalgic B.J. Thomas kick lately. B.J. Thomas, his place at the top of the music chart spanned 3 decades, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 3 genres, country, Christian, and pop rock, with hits like Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, Hooked on a Feeling, I Just Can't Help Believing, and another Somebody Done Somebody Wrong song. He died just a couple years ago in 2021 at age 78. And a couple days ago, I was listening to an automated mix of his music that led to an album that I hadn't heard of, Songs from the Neighborhood, the music of Mr. Rogers. Yeah, I know. So I, of course, had to listen to it. Thomas is among several famous artists who perform pop versions of 13 songs from the beloved children's television show, including John Cicada, for those who remember his name, who starts off with, "What else? Won't you be my neighbor?" And I got a warm, nostalgic feeling hearing it, but to my surprise, it conjured up sad thoughts and images rather than pleasant memories of Mr. Rogers singing the iconic melody while changing into his sweater and sneakers at the start of his show. Upon hearing it, I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. I suddenly thought about those living in the Catalyst, the former Spokane hotel that was recently transformed into a homeless shelter or transitional housing that so happens to be in my neighborhood. And I thought about the hostility and the fear that so many of my neighbors expressed over this addition, and of how it must feel to those now living at the Catalyst to know they're unwelcome, feared, and misunderstood by so many, especially at a time when they are in such need of understanding and help. I've always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. And I wanted to stand outside that shelter and blast that song to everyone inside. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? I thought of Vladimir Putin's unprovoked war against Ukraine and of the heartless destruction of neighborhoods and the killing of neighbors happening there. Such barbarity raging at the very start of another new year, instead of living as we teach our children the world over. It's a neighborly day in the beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be? Could you be? I thought of all the unnecessary and tragic mass shootings in our country, including the most recent in California. And of course, I thought of those 6 officers in Memphis who only a couple weeks ago beat Tyree Nichols to death in his own neighborhood. Won't you please, please, won't you be my neighbor? Neighbors are people who are close to us. And friends are people who are close to our hearts. I like to think of you as my neighbor and as my friend. I thought of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, the young Iranian woman who was killed in October while in custody of Iran's immoral morality police. And I thought of what a sad end to one year and the discouraging beginning of another. Memphis is our neighbor, and so was Tyree Nichols. Los Angeles and Half Moon Bay, California are our neighbors, and so are those who are now not even the most recent victims of mass shootings in our nation. The people of Ukraine are our neighbors, and so are all those who've been killed, injured, and suffered loss because of one madman's lust for power. People living in Camp Hope right here in Spokane are our neighbors no matter what part of town we live in, and so are those now living in the Catalyst just a couple miles down the road. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please? Won't you be my neighbor? How is it that our species so often engages in the taking of others' lives? If I were to answer this question in one sentence, I'd say it's because we don't recognize our relationship to the victims of our homicidal tendencies. And this has been so since humanity's earliest days on earth, at which time we lived like other apes still do, in small family troops. And it is because of this kin selection, as it is referred to by evolutionary psychologists, that remains a part of our genetic makeup and inherited instinct. Favoring our own kin, those most closely related to us, is an important instinct when it comes to the survival of our children and perpetually passing along our genetic information, which is our biological purpose. As evolutionary psychologist Robert Wright writes in his book, The Moral Animal, the only potentially immortal organic entity is a gene, or strictly speaking, the pattern information encoded in the gene, since the physical gene itself will pass away after conveying the pattern through replication. Doesn't that make you feel valuable? The genetic instinct to favor those most closely related to ourselves remains present in us today. The theory of kin selection, coined by biologist William Hamilton in 1963, holds that individuals of any sexually reproducing species will behave altruistically toward kin in proportion to the number of genes they share. Parents and children and full brothers and sisters share 50% of their genes, and so will behave more altruistically toward each other than toward first cousins, who share only 25%. The fewer genes we have in common with others, including more distant relatives, the less altruistic we are instinctively inclined to feel toward them, and even less toward those we have or feel we have no direct relationship with at all. As human societies become larger, first as tribes, or became larger, first as tribes, then kingdoms, then states, and eventually nations, we had to develop additional non-genetic reasons to feel related to each other in order to live peacefully together. Identifying strongly as a member of one's tribe or kingdom or state or nation in which one is born has proven to be a potent substitute, if not a hijacker, of our instinct towards kin selection. This is why, in the age of nationalism, it has been acceptable to go to war with those outside of our nations, including collateral damage to unintentional and sometimes intentional, indiscriminate killing of civilians, because we don't feel related to outsiders. Today is the age of the nation-state wanes, and we feel less bound to our national identities. We are returning to smaller tribal mindsets, tribal groups based upon shared religion, politics, ideology, and personal identities like race, sexuality, and gender. And this has led to a lot more anxiety and conflict in our lives, since outsiders are no longer a remote reality beyond the borders of our nations, but can be anyone, anywhere, including our own countrymen, our next-door neighbors, classmates, co-workers, and so forth. This isn't good, given the fear of differences is about as instinctive in us as is our fondness for our own kind, our kin and kindred spirits. The stories we tell and warnings we still give our children about avoiding the big bad wolf and talking to strangers are ancient and are indicative of our biological tendency to avoid anything we are unfamiliar with because it might be dangerous. Anyone we are not familial with. Strangers, including their strange beliefs, languages, religions, colors, and cultures. We instinctively dislike those who are dislike us, which leads to ridiculing and then demonizing them, which further leads to dehumanizing them and then to disregarding their worth and dignity so we can justify oppressing, exploiting, excluding, and even killing them without having to acknowledge we are harming real human beings. We call them monsters, traitors, criminals, terrorists, anything to avoid acknowledging their humanity. I recall many years ago seeing President George W. Bush on a stage during which he held out his arm as if he was hugging someone. And he told the audience, "You've got to put your arm around your neighbor and tell them you love them." Which was pretty good advice, yet only moments earlier, the same president who was already responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people living in Afghanistan and Iraq, said that he was going to hunt down the terrorists one by one and kill them. No matter how many other outsiders get hurt in the process. You can imagine my shock as I looked around the room, wondering if anybody caught this discrepancy but me. Anyway, I did not make an international incident out of it, although I was tempted to. It seemed clear to me then that his definition of who our neighbors are extends no farther than the U.S. borders. And as much as this attitude grieves me, I cannot blame anyone for succumbing to the powerful genetic instincts that I've outlined, instincts that once worked to help the fittest or maybe the fiercest of our ancestors survive: kin selection and our fear of strangers. But we no longer live in their small worlds and no longer face the constant danger of being eaten alive by a predator or overpowered by another unknown band of humans. This is why during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods we developed an even better way of getting along with each other, even better than substituting our family bonds with tribal, national, and other identities. We recognize our kinship with all of humanity. And with this, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. This notion, also called universalism, with a small u, when truly believed and cherished, prevents us from hating and harming others, including strangers, as much as if they were considered members of our own family. And they are. Another way to put it is that all persons, because they are human beings, have what philosophers call moral status. This is what Immanuel Kant was getting at with his categorical imperative. Act only according to those rules that you can also will as universal laws. A rule, in other words, that is applicable in all circumstances. That rule for Kant and others is the recognition that all persons have worth and dignity. That was the categorical imperative. That all people, therefore, must be treated as such. In his book, Reality Plus, philosopher David Chalmers has a unique selection on moral status, explaining that a being has moral status when it's an object of moral concern in roughly the way that people are objects of moral concern. That is, it's a being whose welfare we need to take into account in our moral deliberations. If you have moral status, you are a being whose welfare we need to take into account in our moral deliberations. And although this definition takes for granted that all human beings have moral status, Chalmers gives an example suggesting that even this much isn't always considered so. The Black Lives Matter movement is all about moral status, he says. Black lives matter as much as human lives do. In the past and even today, many people in many social institutions have treated black lives as if they mattered less than white lives. So even though we say all human beings have moral status and should thus be treated with dignity, many in the world, the Palestinians that you mentioned earlier, are still treated with less moral status than others, and some with little moral status at all. So given that his book looks at the problems of philosophy through the lens of virtual reality, Chalmers asks us to consider if it is ethical to kill virtual persons, including virtual zombies and other computer-generated human simulations. Is it ethical to kill virtual people in our games? So the ethics of violent games aside, we'll set those questions aside. The questions Chalmers is asking us to consider is, do simulated persons have moral status? Is it unethical for us to kill them in video games? So these philosophical zombies are described as near duplicates of human beings with no conscious inner life at all. Zombies have no subjective experience. And for Chalmers, this is precisely why they don't have any moral status. It is why zombie lives don't matter. My own view, he says, shared with many others, is that what bestows moral status is consciousness. If an entity has no capacity for consciousness and never will have, then it has no moral status. It can be treated as an object. Now, this phrase, capacity for consciousness, makes the question of moral status even more complex, doesn't it? Because it implies our decisions and actions must also consider the welfare of other creatures too. If it can experience something, he says, that should be taken into account in our moral calculations. It's arguable that systems with a minimal degree of consciousness, ants, have only a minimal degree of moral status, and so weigh much less heavily than humans in our moral deliberations, but consciousness at least gets them in the door. Consciousness at least gets ants in the door. We don't want them in the door. So it may be necessary to kill a pantry invading ant colony But it is not ethical to step on an ant, extinguishing its life for no good reason, just because we can. Someday, perhaps sooner than we imagine, we will create virtual entities that are conscious and have subjective experiences, and by Chalmers' definition should then be granted moral status. Chalmers makes a good argument that we ourselves are conscious simulations living in a virtual reality. So for an intriguing and fun ride down that road, I suggest you read Reality Plus. But for our purposes, I would say that to a large extent, all of us are living in a reality of our own making, and perhaps one that has been imposed upon us, largely imposed upon us by others, but doesn't necessarily reflect reality. It reminds me of a cartoon someone sent me earlier where a Catholic priest was talking down a Native American, saying, "Why, if it weren't for us, you people would still be worshiping the sun." And the Native American says, "Dude, the sun is real." So, we assume ours is the truth, right? But maybe we're not dealing with reality, even if we think ours is the reality. But we all deserve moral status, whether we know the truth or not, or grasp it or not, because we do have subjective experiences and because we are conscious, or at least semi-conscious. But our grasp on truth and reality is extremely limited and may be more in our heads than anywhere else. What we consider to be true and real is merely our interpretation of the information we perceive through our biases and limited senses, and today there is more information bombarding us than ever, much of it false to begin with. At best, in my opinion, we should depend upon empirical evidence and sound reason to interpret the reality around us as best we can, but even this is limited and subject to error. It's also true, as we have seen, that our reality is often shaped by ancient genetic and biological instincts that may no longer serve us well. It is these instincts that have too often led our species to limit the boundaries of our worldviews, so that the only people we treat as real people are those within our small circles of inclusion and recognition, our own families, our tribes, our identity groups, our religion, our political party, our country, or just those living in the few square blocks we consider our neighborhood, those on our side of the tracks. Too many of us treat those outside these small circles as one of Chalmers' philosophical zombies, as if, as he says, there is arguably no one home to mistreat. They can be mistreated because they live outside the virtual realities and are not considered our virtual realities and are not considered real people, or are thought of as lesser people, undeserving of the same level of moral status as ourselves. The process, again, is simple. Draw a circle around those we most closely identify with, demonize those outside the boundary, then dehumanize them so that we can more easily deny their inherent worth and dignity. Chalmers says a philosophical zombie isn't the Hollywood version that's risen from the dead. Instead, it's a being that looks and behaves just like an ordinary human being, but is not conscious at all. For a philosophical zombie, everything is dark inside. Is this what we convince ourselves is true of those who whose lives and welfare and dignity we so easily disregard. That they are dark inside. That they are zombies without any real moral status, that like ants can simply be crushed if they get in our way, if they creep into our pantries, cross our borders, vote against us, move into our neighborhoods. Although the concept of universal human worth and dignity has been central to global democracy since the French Revolution, and since has been embedded into the constitutions of countries like Germany and Italy and Ireland, Japan, Israel, South Africa, and the United States and other nations, we have all had a hard time living up to this great aspiration. I'm grateful to be part of a liberal religion that considers, at least for the time being, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our first principle, our starting place. And it is why I am committed to doing what I can to help our religion survive and thrive, so that we can remain that still small voice in the world, a bit of human conscience that reminds us that we must continue to expand our consciousness so that it will grow big enough to include the whole hoop of the world, so that nobody anywhere will ever be treated like a mindless, soulless zombie, so that there will be no more mass shootings or wars or young women brutalized by the morality police or young black men beaten to death by cops or people living in freezing tents on barren plots of land or under dark overpasses because we're afraid to let them into our neighborhoods. Our liberal religion, our nation, and the whole of Western culture, if not the whole of humanity, aspires to establish the kind of society that is so fundamental to what it means to be good that even a child can comprehend how we ought to treat each other. Won't you please, won't you please, please, won't you be my neighbor? Thank you.
Well, to close, we're going to sing I Can See Clearly Now. And I chose this one because I hope that at least we are on the road to where Todd is talking about. Even those of us in this church who think we're on the road, and I think we are, but it strikes me that we can still move. So please rise as you're willing and able to sing along with me on I Can See Clearly Now. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me down. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. I think I can make it now, the pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is that rainbow I've been praying for. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Look all around, there's nothing but blue sky. Look straight ahead, there's nothing but blue sky. Oh, oh,
Our benediction is this simple but profound statement by Ram Dass. We are all just walking each other home. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.
Shalom.